Oh, score update.
Hello.
Hey, Cliff.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, not too bad. Yourself?
Doing good, thanks.
All right. Thanks for staying up late with us. Tony, you're there?
I am here.
All right, perfect. We're good. We're good. All right. All right. So I don't know if there's going to be enough questions to drag this out for 20 minutes. So that might work out for you, but because we might just focus on ownership in Johnny Manziel. So I'm joking. There's more questions for that. All right. Let me grab the itinerary. All right. All ready to go, Tony?
I am prepared.
All right. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to the single point. On this week, we continue the 9 teams in 9 weeks, and this week we'll focus on the Montreal Alouettes, and for that, we head to La Belle Province. This is my best French accent I can do. To one of the co-hosts of the ALouette FlightDeck podcast, Cliffy D. Cliff, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So first off, last week I had a Freudian slip. So when promoting this week's show, I meant to say Cliff is quite the regular, but instead I said Cliff is quite regular. So naturally, we got emails inquiring on if you were eating bran flakes. So I'm not too sure if that's TMI for you, but if you really want to tell our listeners, are you into the bran?
I do try to keep healthy. It's definitely important to stay regular, no matter what. It's all about moderation, right? So you want to have that healthy balance. So I'm on board with that, absolutely.
Nice. It would be a new sponsor for the Canadian Football Podcast Network. Abe, so before we get into the on-field product, because that's a lot what other people care about, let's go to the off-field quote-unquote drama. What's going on with ownership in Montreal right now? Because the last that we talked about is former Alouette Eric Lapointe getting everything, and then apparently that's not going through. Now a new Cliff coming into the picture to buy the Alouette. So you being in the center of the Montreal drama, so to speak, clear things up. Where's ownership on in Montreal?
Well, I guess it all depends on who you ask, because to be honest with you, it's as clear as mud right now, because now we don't know. Do the Wettenhall family still own the Alouettes? Does the league own the Alouettes? Are they looking for new owners? Period. Like, what the heck's going on? And unfortunately, just nobody seems to have any real concrete answers. And at this point now, it's just all about speculation. Like, now there are at least apparently 3 groups that are interested in buying the Alouettes and being able to run them full time. I don't know what's happening as far as the league's involvement in this. A lot of people are thinking that maybe the league has stepped in to take the team from the Wettenhall family and then basically run it until they can vet whoever the new ownership group is going to be. To tell you the truth, it's really just there's more questions than answers right now, and nobody seems to want to divulge any sort of information. So that's making it even harder to, like I said, all you can do at this point is just sort of spitball and assume what's going to happen, but until we get anything official, it's just you're just guessing here.
So I've been vocal on the Wettenhalls for quite some time. Is it safe to assume that maybe some fans in Montreal are the same? You know, that where they think that change of ownership might as well have happened yesterday because it's just not looking good at this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans here in Montreal and even league-wide absolutely 100% respect what Robert Wettenhall, the true owner of the Alouettes, has done, but unfortunately his health is not that great, so he's been taking less and less of an ownership role, and it's his son Andrew that's been sort of overseeing things and calling the shots for essentially the past couple of years. And unfortunately, Andrew doesn't seem to have the same how should I say, panache that his father does when it comes to football and ownership of the football team. Basically, it seems like a lot of the decisions that have been made are coming from Andrew, and they're not good ones. And that's a big problem because, as you've seen, the Alouettes have not made the playoffs in the past 4 seasons. They've had 8 wins in the past 2 years. I mean, I get it. The cool thing to do is to blame Cavis Reed for everybody's woes. I get that, but I mean, it all starts at the top, and it really comes down to what has Andrew Wetenhall done for the Alouettes, and as of late, it's really been not much. So I think the time now has come that people are finally realizing, okay, this is definitely a bigger problem than just who the general manager is or who the head coach is in Montreal. It starts at the top, and you got to get that taken care of. And now the question is, who's going to take over for this family? Who's going to become the next leader of the Alouettes? Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to run the show? And most importantly, who's going to put together what it takes to become a winning franchise again?
Herb Zergowski, beat writer for the Alouettes, has mentioned that Eric Lapointe was front runner and seems to put his vote of confidence behind Eric Lapointe. No, that may not even happen. But what's the sense in the rest of Montreal? Does that just seem that they prefer Eric Lapointe, or is it just a matter of, hey, we just got to get anybody away, get this organization away from the Wetenhalls?
Well, you definitely want to, as I said, make sure you've got the right people in place. And Eric Lapointe's group definitely would be a great option, if only for the fact that Lapointe does know what it takes to be a winner in Montreal, having had a successful career in the Canadian Football League and now a successful post-football career in the financial world. So he's definitely got the smarts, he's got the knowledge, the passion, all the things that ideally would make for a great football owner in the Canadian Football League. So I think a lot of fans would really like to see him become a member, like become the owner of the Alouettes, or at least leading the charge, so to speak. So, again, it's still all speculation, because there are a couple other groups that are interested in well. It's just a matter, I guess, now that the league has to decide really, truly, like, would Lapointe's group be the best fit, or would it be one of these other groups?
All right, so we're let's get off the off the field. Let's get back to the on field, because that's what we love to talk about. The Alouettes were quite active in free agency. What do you think is the biggest acquisition in your opinion?
The biggest acquisition, I would have to say, well, you can make a really good case for Taylor Loeffler. I mean, that was a move that nobody saw coming. Like, he was definitely a free agent, but I'm sure a lot of people thought he was going to end up back in Winnipeg, because he's been an all-star in his all 3 years that he's been in the league. He's been an all-star. He's been an absolutely fantastic player. It just seems surprising that the Blue Bombers wouldn't do all that they can to keep him under wraps, but lo and behold, Davis Reed, in the dead of night, essentially signs this guy to a contract for the Alouettes. I mean, that is just phenomenal. Like, this defense is going to be really, really something special, I think. Just with what you've seen in the secondary, the linebackers that have been signed, if they can get the defensive line shored up a little bit as well, this is going to be a very exciting defense to watch.
I'm glad you mentioned defense, because Mike Sherman added Bob Slolik, I think I pronounced the name right, who's a veteran of the NFL. Now, with another coach who has limited CFL experience on the sidelines in Montreal, what is the defensive outlook other than potential? What is, I guess, the potential to be on the Montreal defensive side?
Well, on paper, like the roster is going to be extremely competitive. My concern, though, is that this coach has not been in a football locker room of any kind in the past 6 years. That, to me, is very bold, I guess would be a very polite way of putting it. In fact, in talking to a couple of defensive players at the jersey launch this past February, I asked what they thought about it, and you could see them really struggling to not say anything negative, but I guess concern would be more the question, because of this, just simply the fact that, one, this guy has no CFL experience, and two, he hasn't coached anywhere, whether it's like high school football, Pop Warner, overseas, anything. He hasn't been in any sort of football locker room in the past 6 years, and now you've just handed him over the defense for a Canadian Football League team, a league he knows absolutely nothing about. I mean, yes, football is football to a degree, but at the same time, I think you'll agree that there's so many different nuances in the Canadian game that you just can't pick up overnight. I mean, this is something that takes time, and the fact that the Alouettes could only find this guy to be the defensive coordinator, I mean, that's it's going to be interesting. I think I'm trying to be so positive about this, but I mean, I got to be realistic too. I'm like, this doesn't necessarily equal a recipe for success. So I just don't know how else to paint this, to be honest with you.
Well, welcome to Winnipeg Blue Bomber fandom, circa 2012 to 2013. So, yeah, you're welcome. Speaking of Kavis Reed, now he has been quite active in free agency, but his record as GM kind of speaks to itself, and it doesn't take a year to rebuild. So is Kavis on a very extremely short leash going into 2019?
If he wasn't before, he definitely is now with the prospect of a new ownership group, because under the Wedenhall family, they may have been willing to give him free pass after free pass. But even before all this ownership talk went down, there was talk that, yes, Kavis is on a very short leash, and essentially the writing is pretty much on the wall that it's either playoffs or bust for not just Kavis Reed, but also for Mike Sherman and his group as well. Now that the fact we've got new ownership potentially coming in, I would definitely say Kavis definitely has to be looking over his shoulder quite a bit, because if the Alouettes do not make the playoffs, at the very least, I just can't foresee any possible scenario where Reed, Sherman, and the entire coaching staff in general would be back again in 2020. It just, to me, wouldn't make a whole lot of sense.
I'll ask one more question before Tony asks about your thoughts on the uniforms. Johnny Manziel, because the Kavis Reed made one of the biggest trades by name only last year, sending or acquiring Johnny Manziel and who else did he? Tony Washington for Jamal Westerman, Chris Williams going the other way, and a couple of first-round picks. Johnny Manziel released because of issues, goes to the AFL. Everybody knows what happened that. Manziel being gone, is that addition by subtraction, or is this another step backwards for the organization as far as the quarterback position goes? Because honestly, the same story over and over again, despite the fact that they had Kevin Glenn for a year and Jonathan Crompton had some hope. The Alouettes at the behind center have really, really failed their fan base since Anthony Calvillo retired in 2013.
Without question. I've been calling it the quarterback clown car as far as the number of quarterbacks that have taken snaps under center for the Alouettes since AC's career was unfortunately cut. Can I really say his career was cut short? I guess he just didn't leave the way he wanted to. I guess would be a better way to put it. But yeah, I think as far as I'm concerned with Johnny Manziel being asked to leave the Canadian Football League, I think this is going to be a blessing in disguise for the Alouettes, because now they can focus not on trying to make Johnny Manziel a CFL quarterback, which just quite frankly was not going to happen just based on his work ethic and a lot of his post-CFL comments. Now you can focus on the quarterbacks you do have in camp. For example, Vernon Adams Jr., Matthew Schultz, and of course Antonio Pipkin, who's actually won games for the Alouettes in 2018. These are some young quarterbacks that are exciting to watch. These are quarterbacks that are still in their early to mid-20s. Like, these are guys that you can build a franchise around. And I think one of these guys will step up and will become the next quarterback of the future. It's just a matter of having that opportunity. And now that you don't have to cater to trying to build a playbook around Johnny Manziel and his skill set, you can focus on these young studs, and one of them will step up and they will be that next quarterback for the Alouettes. So I'm pretty excited to see which one it is, which one is going to step up and actually be that quarterback.
I did have one question, but Dalt pretty much told you what I was going to ask, so I'm just sitting here like, so tell us about the uniforms then. But actually, something did come across, and I'm literally just reading during this interview about a new territorial draft that the CFL wants to do. Now, we all kind of know that Montreal has been a bit of a football factory. Do you think this is like the CFL fixing the Alouettes for the Alouettes? Have you had a chance to read much more on this territorial draft for non-playoff teams?
Well, it's definitely interesting. I can definitely see the optics of it not looking all that great for the rest of the league, because, yeah, it kind of looks like you're trying to help give the teams that aren't doing so well, like the Torontos and Montreal, give them a bit of an advantage, or sort of a bit of a helping hand, if you will, as far as trying to develop talent. But to me, and I've said this about all drafts, is it really comes down to the people that you have drafting for you and making sure that they're getting the right people in place. Now, say what you will about Kavis, but I personally feel the past 2 drafts he's done extremely well in identifying talent that, if given the chance to nurture and grow, can really become something special. So I can see how this would look like a bit of an unfair advantage, but at the same time, too, you want this league to be stronger. You want this league to grow, and especially with the Canadian talent that's prevalent throughout the entire league. Maybe this is that little shot in the arm that will help the team get better, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to who they get who they take with this. I believe it's in the end of the second round. If it all depends who's available at that point and who they draft, because it sounds like it, but it already comes down to what you do with that particular pick. So I'm curious to see how it's all going to work out, and I don't know how this will go forward. I mean, it's definitely something that's a little interesting, and I just have to wonder how this was all thought about by the CFL, and I just think maybe the way they presented it just wasn't the best, and I can understand why some fans of other teams are just kind of looking at this like, what's going on here with this? Like, this doesn't seem like it's fair, and maybe it's not fair, but I guess only time will tell. Like I said, CFL just did not really present this, I think, in the best light.
Well, I think if I'm Kavis Reed, the obvious choice is drafting Laval. Just like all of it. Like, just say, we're going to draft Laval. We're taking all of it.
It's really not a bad strategy. I mean, the Alouettes did it for years back in the 2000s when like all those teams were winning Vanier Cup after Vanier Cup, and it kind of felt like there was times where I'm sure a lot of people have felt like the Laval Rouge era was like the unofficial farm team for the Alouettes, because everybody else would draft other players, and Montreal would be like, okay, well, we'll take this guy. We'll take this guy. Well, by the way, they won Vanier Cups. Like, they got championship experience, and sure enough, you ended up with some pretty awesome players. So, yeah, again, Quebec football has grown by leaps and bounds over the years, and they've not just Laval, but other teams in the league have also produced some pretty exciting football players. So, yeah, there's again, this is why I see that there's a bit of an unfair advantage, if you will. But again, lots of teams were also starting to catch up as well. Calgary was drafting, Edmonton was drafting from Laval the past couple of years. So I think the secret's out. I mean, if you're not paying attention by now, you know that Laval is producing some pretty quality football players. So if you've got that first or second round draft pick, and there's a guy from Laval available, you could do far worse than picking that guy as your next potential player.
Well, this works out for Montreal because Montreal doesn't have a first-round pick for a while. But thank you, Johnny Manziel. Cliff, before we let you go, you need to give us your predictions for the Owls this season. Bonus points for the record.
Oh gosh, it's so hard to say, to be honest with you. There's definitely talent on this team. I definitely think they're going in the right direction as far as building a team. I just can't promise anything as far as like to put an actual number on it. I just can't right now. I mean, again, I'm still very concerned about this defensive coordinator who hasn't coached in 6 years. A head coach who still is learning the Canadian game, and there's just so many other factors. Like, this team has to win. There's no question about it, and they've got the talent to win. I just don't feel 100% confident that this particular coaching staff is the right combination of people in place that are going to help this team get past, say, 7, 8, 9 wins. I hope so. I would love to see it. And as I've said, as far as I'm concerned, it's playoffs or bust if Kavis and the rest of the group want to stick around in Montreal. Pat was with his new ownership group coming into play. As far as I'm concerned, the Alouettes have to make the playoffs. Will they make the playoffs? Only time's going to tell. But as it stands right now, like, I just can't give an honest prediction other than they won't go 0-18. And they won't go 18-0.
I was like, wouldn't it be funny if you just went reverse Ryan from the CFL Horseman podcast? Just pick 0-18. Just stick with it. They win a game, and that's already above expectations. Well, Cliff, where can all our listeners follow you on the interwebs?
Well, the best place to start would be on Twitter at Cliffy D. That's CLIFFYD. If you want to read my thoughts on the Alouettes, you can certainly check out the Alternative blog. You can find that at www.alternative.com. And of course, definitely check out the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast, and you can find that over at www.alouettesflightdeck.ca with myself and Tim Capper. And you can also listen to the show on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Awesome, great to listen to you guys getting a French version. Well, I guess you guys don't even speak French on the podcast. You guys should do a podcast where it's just French.
I've actually had a couple of folks come up to me and talk to me about wanting to do a French Alouettes podcast, and I've encouraged them. I said, yes, by all means do so. Like, I would listen to it, and I can't guarantee the rest of Canada would. Maybe they would still come to us for the Alouettes news because, yes, we do it in English, but I would definitely be all for a French Alouettes fan podcast. I really hope these guys do follow through with it, and I would support it 100%. And I like to think the rest of the league and the rest of the Canadian Football Podcast Network would do so as well.
Oh, it would be awesome here. So one question, one last thing before we let you go, just for our listeners' sake. So you do eat bran flakes in moderation?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything in moderation.
Well, Cliff, thanks for staying up late with us on the Roost Radio podcast. Hopefully we'll have you back in the near future to talk about the bright side of the Alouettes' future.
Well, and that's really what keeps me going, is that they say it's always darkest before dawn. And yeah, it's been a little bit of a rough ride for Alouettes fans, but if this team can get its act together and they can get things figured out, I'm telling you, this has potential to be a really fun team to watch. And I really hope the next time that we sit down and talk, it'll be to talk about all the awesome things the Alouettes have been doing instead of the constant missteps more than anything else. I really hope that things are now going to be on the upswing.
Unless the awesome thing involves firing Cavers Reed, but I digress. Cliff, thanks again for joining us later tonight.
Alrighty, thank you.